my audio.
Oh, I can't hear you, Steph. Let me know when we're ready to go. Or a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Welcome everybody to what is it today? January 13th, 2023. Yes. Getting used to that date. And the Housing Advisory Committee. And we'll bring the meeting to order. Can we have approval of the agenda? Hopefully everybody's had a chance to have a look at it. Are there any late items? I can't hear Steph. Can anybody else? Oh, shoot. Maybe
You're
chat.
on mute, Steph.
There we go.
It doesn't say mute, but it's not coming up.
Yeah.
I had sent that spreadsheet that doesn't make a lot of sense, but I can talk about for 4.1b.
Okay. Okay. Good. So just an extra bit of
Is
information.
Fritz's package, is that for the agenda? Fritz's,
Oh, and Fritz's, yeah.
Do we include that in the agenda, or is that just for reference when we're talking about that item? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I like it in the agenda. Yeah, I was just looking if it was in there.
well, no, because it came out after, I think.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
You got to look under staff if you're searching.
Okay. Schedule it for October, right?
Okay. Well, so we'll add Daniel's little spreadsheets and then Fritz's note that he sent. So we'll add those to the agenda. Any other items? I was just going to have a couple quick updates, but I think I'll just add that under other business 6.2 when we get to it. Okay, so can I have somebody move the agenda? Thank you, Ron. Second. Thank you, Fritz. All in favor? Yep. Okay. Moved. So accept the agenda. Adoption of minutes. So our last meeting, December 14th. Does anybody have any comments about the minutes? Nope. Does somebody want to move to accept them?
That's okay.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Fritz. Okay. Second by Ron. All in favor?
Bye.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go. Good news. Okay. Next one. Let's see. Public comments. So I know we have a member of the public, Amiko. Did you want to speak at the public comment section? No. Okay. Good. So, and Steph, no other public comments? No. Okay. Moving right along. Excellent. Number 4.1, council referral, rezoning application 8 Arbutus Bay Road. I will hand it over to Daniel.
Thank you, Robyn. So I don't have a presentation for this application unless people want me to pull up the one from previous to talk about just the proposal that we had discussed at the last meeting. We did do a site visit yesterday. And so Fritz and Councillors Tim Wake and Alison Morse both attended for the Housing Advisory Committee, and then as well as we had APC members and Parks and Trails and Greenways members. So it was a very good site visit, I feel like, despite the weather. So everyone persevered well. I don't know if maybe from that point, it's like if people had thoughts they wanted to share from the site visit, maybe this would be a good time, and then we could talk specifically about the housing, the affordable housing piece of it.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing that I noticed that many times I asked the owners kind of where I was, you know what I mean? I found it helpful. But then I also thought there's some main features, and then there was what came up a few times is, do you want to walk up there because that's in the dedicated or the proposed park? And then I thought, well, and then what I also understood from the tour is that the proposal is still somewhat in a phase of development. You know what I mean? That these property lines are adjusted as the plan is developing further. So then I thought that if there's a also I think what I understood is that when there's an open house, there would also be an opportunity for people to walk around if they would want to. And then I thought if it would be a little easier to find some of those main features, that would be helpful for a lot of people. I personally think it's a very interesting and beautiful proposal. You know, if you walk the site, it's just amazing. And so it is worthwhile to to kind of check that everybody just kind of understands it.
And that's a good point too, Fritz. And so for other members or anybody from the public watching this, it's like we are advertising an open house as well for January 27th, I believe, if that's the Friday, from 1 to 3. So if people want to view the site again or for the first time, there will be an opportunity then.
You know, what I also noticed is that that for a lot of people, the trail experience will probably be significant. Like, you know, there is, if you look at it on a drawing, it looks like, okay, there's a lot of green, but it's really, what it really is, it's a walkthrough, it's an experience. And if you would follow that, how interesting that is, and maybe links up to other parts of Bowen Island's proposed trail system. You know what I mean? Like if you go on a holiday or so, if you walk somewhere, you put a video camera on your head. That's your experience. But it's an amazing proposal.
Anybody else who was at the site visit? Tim or Alison, did you want to say anything, having seen the site?
Oh, no, I'm more the housing side. I've got a few sort of questions about the park and the conservation area and things like that, but they're more practical. How's it all going to get implemented? Nothing to do with the housing. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I was,
Tim?
I didn't appreciate how much vertical there was on the site until I got onto it. I guess I perceived it as being more sort of gentle and rolling, and it's definitely got lots of steep sections. And but I agree with Fritz that it's a beautiful site, and I think I'm interested in talking about a few of the specifics around the housing, but we'll get to that later.
Okay, great. So Daniel, really, you don't have much in terms of a presentation or guiding, but this is a continuation of from the last meeting, right? And
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I had some notes up from last time. Let's see. I mean, I think some of our discussions were maybe, Daniel, do you want to go into that spreadsheet that you sent out? Because I know some of the discussion was around like, what's 15%? What's this affordable housing? How is that going to be measured? Is that relevant to your spreadsheet that you sent out?
Yeah, so why don't I
we
pull
start there?
that up? Okay, does that work? Do you see the spreadsheet? Okay, so essentially what I had done is based on our discussion last time was just pulling up, okay, if 3 houses are currently permitted on the site and a detached secondary suite, what would be the increase of floor area if there were 7 lots that could each have a house and a detached secondary suite? And looking at it at different scenarios of different maximum house size that I sort of just arbitrarily picked to show how the math works. So I had the area here at first because I was going to calculate the detached secondary suite maximum size, but they're large enough lots that you would, under the current regulations, you would hit the maximum for a detached secondary suite. So for the first page, I picked a 200 square meter maximum house size, which is like 2,200 square feet. So I said, okay, if all the 7 lots would be that big, and then the 3 current houses, you know, we're picking that same floor area. So we're saying the increase in floor area is the difference between, you know, what was permitted for the 3 houses in the detached secondary suite versus what would be permitted on 7 lots. And so I got then a total buildable floor area in the new development of 2,380 square meters, and then calculating the net floor area then is the increase above what's currently permitted. So I would get 1,640, and 15% being 246 square meters, which is 2,700 square feet. And then scenario 2, then looking at essentially the same calculation, but looking at a 300 square meter maximum house size plus the detached secondary suite. And that ended up with a net floor area of just over 2,000 square meters. And then looking at the 15% then being about 300 square meters. And then for the third one, I just said, well, what if, what if I'm just looking at, okay, what's a maximum residential floor area? Like if the zoning just said, okay, this is the amount of floor area you can have in a dwelling unit, and, be it a house or the suite, and it's not, not concerned with those. That then came, net floor area of 1,400 square meters and a 15% of 210 square meters. And then I have this in an Excel as well. So if people want to know different scenarios, I can just play around with the formula, but that's essentially what I had calculated out to share. I'll stop there.
So,
yeah,
Go ahead, Tim. Yep.
so in speaking with Brian yesterday, he did mention that their interest is to limit house size, and these numbers that you've just suggested all seem pretty modest. So, and I think that's great. But what is ultimately going to determine the maximum house size, the maximum square footage?
I mean, ultimately, it's like it would be enshrined in the zoning. So, like most of our typical zones don't have a maximum floor area; they have just a lot coverage. But some of our CD zones do have a maximum floor area, and so if that's sort of, if that's the essential piece driving, like the affordable housing piece, then maybe that's appropriate that we have a maximum floor area. So the zoning would just say, in this zone, this is your maximum. I'll try to find, hang on, let me find the Arbutus Ridge CD zone has a similar, it has a maximum.
How are the sizes of the lots on Arbutus Ridge in comparison to these?
Much smaller.
Yeah.
And then the other piece that, the scenario doesn't go into, which I know that the Housing Advisory Committee has discussed in the past, is the idea that actually, having a maximum and then allowing additional for secondary suites.
Yeah.
And that's something that we did most recently in the rezoning on Malcolm Creek, where they have a maximum floor area of X, but then it can increase to, X plus whatever for the provision of a secondary suite. So that would be my worry of having, the scenario where there's a total building area of, whatever it is, 350 square meters. Is it then people buying it would then maximize the house size and not be encouraged to put in a suite, whereas in the past the Housing Advisory Committee has wanted to encourage the suite. So maybe then it would say, okay, we have a maximum of a certain number, and then you can go above that if you're building a suite. But then maybe that would say, well, then the calculation for affordable housing is for that first base number, and you're saying we're not then, the secondary suite is okay, that's providing a form of rental housing, so we're not using that in the calculation for the affordable housing contribution.
I think what I was really wondering about is how is that ultimately going to get determined? Are we going to recommend maximum? Are you going to recommend a maximum? And when it actually comes forward,
right? Gotcha. I mean, I think so. The Housing Advisory Committee could either recommend that there be a maximum, or recommend that there be a maximum of X.
Or do we just need to say an amount for the for the affordable housing is X? Or, I mean, it's more the calculation is, these are all hypothetical numbers, and as a buyer, I wouldn't want to be necessarily bound by certain things, but if these are hypothetical numbers, can we not just then say the use them for saying how many? I mean, the whole discussion we got into was how many units or how much of affordable housing is appropriate. So rather than putting in floor areas and everything else for the main houses, just put in X units of affordable housing. I mean, the question is it 1 unit or is it 2 units? Or I think that was why Kim was asking how are we going to calculate what's 15%.
Right.
Mhm.
And so if we come up with a number that we think is what is the affordable housing number, let's just put that in the bylaw.
Right.
Okay,
And so
thanks, Alison.
specifying that there be,
One or
A
two, I mean, that's the
right.
question, how many?
Yeah, yeah.
I-
I mean, I think too, the discussion the Housing Advisory Committee had started last meeting, but not settled in, at least in that, you know, I was aware of a sort of units, or is this an appropriate site instead for a cash in lieu contribution? Or, I mean, Fritz had provided his thoughts in terms of more aiming it to like affordable home ownership and looking to provide sort of smaller lots on the site.
Yeah, so Danielle, being there yesterday, and somebody brought it up actually, is that if you build a house, you're clearing a piece of the land. If you build a house with a detached secondary suite, you clear more of the lot, right?
Yeah.
So then, and I'll go back to the idea of clustering, which is if you read clustering in the OCP, it's a bit confusing because they're really talking about clustering larger lots, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you think about clustering the way we think about it, then if you would think you would have somehow, and one of the committees is probably more focusing on that, if you look at it from an environmental point of view, and you say from, well, okay, how do you bring the best, I'm going to use the word value, but value from every perspective, you know, value from a ecological perspective, from providing housing for people that need it, and of course, making sure that there is enough value created from a monetary point of view so that these things can actually happen, right? So, so for instance, the way we thought about, if you give a bonus in house size, I don't think you have to force people to rent out secondary suites. You just, is that secondary suite ready idea, and that the house can be used by an owner if they need it. I find your starting number at 200 square meters for these high value lots very low. I think that somehow the people that have the money to make this work, so to speak, are looking for something bigger. Now, if the and that's where I use the term lock-off secondary suite, because that means that it's just set up that the suite can be rented out or used by a family member or God knows what else, right? All these different uses. And that would create a certain number. 200 square meters may be okay for some people, but if you have a larger family, it's just small, you know what I mean? So then if your higher number, the 350, in my mind, is more in the right range for some of these homes. Now, if you purposely say you wanted encourage the owners to build really small houses, but then everything goes down, including your potential for providing affordable housing. And what I actually thought that you could do affordable housing and build smaller homes that people need. You know, like there's always, even on a large lot, there is some relationship between square footage and value. Because like we noticed, I'll give you one example, what happens in a place where it's really clear. That is in urban areas. If you're in the city of Vancouver, people buy a 33-foot lot, they know exactly what they can build. If they need more bedrooms upstairs and they want a bit more space, they buy a 50-foot wide lot, right? The difference in that is whatever. So how many hundreds of thousands of dollars? Now, I think that in this development, you still have to look at that formula. You know, like how does the proposed development and everything that the community wants, you know, like, you know, everything that's on the list, how does that relate?
And I think I agree, Fritz, in terms of like 200 square meters would be like, I don't want to say like aggressively low, but it would be low. So like the Arbutus Ridge development allows 260 square meters. So, but more, it's just like round numbers were there for the sake of the the formula to show like, okay, as the floor area increases, the affordable housing piece increases, or like the 15% increases.
Yeah, if you link them, but for instance, what Alison is saying, you don't link it. Maybe you just
Right.
set the number and see what comes out of it. But then,
Yeah.
then there's still a formula behind that number somehow.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should use the larger number. You know, I mean, given the size of those lots, unless somebody's just building a tiny getaway cottage for a couple, they're not going to build a 200 square meter house, or even maybe a 300. If you're talking about floor area, I can see 200 being the lot coverage amount with 2 floors or something. Then you're looking at 400.
But that's where the secondary suite comes in too. So if you say the secondary suite allows you to put whatever 1,000 square feet more in your home, and you can use it yourself if you want to, but it's set up that in the future it has all these different uses, then you're back to that 300 square meters or even more.
And you know, you want workshops and garages and
Yeah, it's all the you can actually see that, right? When
storage.
I think the clearing thing, somebody mentioned it. I think it was somebody from the was looking at it more from an environmental point of view, because like if you have these lots, although they're big, people start clearing, and then there's just so much left of the trees in between. So that clustering, like for instance, if you would say, I think it's really important here to figure out what actually are our criteria. If you think that we need more people to live in smaller homes and it is more affordable, and you want to protect the environment where you can and have a beautiful experience left of nature, then clustering in smaller pockets actually makes sense. So for instance, like Alison, you were saying yesterday when we were talking, is that you said, well, if you have to move out of your big house, you could see living in a small place, right? But you said 1,500.
Well, my definition of small and yours don't match, Fritz. That's the problem.
Sorry?
My definition of small and, you know, is not, well, 2,000 square meters on one floor might be small.
Well, what I'm just saying is that if a lot of people are looking for something smaller, but you put it on these huge lots, and you still have to make a big clearing in that lot. If that house is a bit bigger or smaller, the clearing is almost the same, right? So what I'm saying is that then, is that the right formula? Is it better to, let's say, for instance, if you drive in, and I thought maybe if you want to stay with 7 homes, I think, well, why, you know? Because like what Daniel does, of course, makes sense. He looks at the OCP and tries to make it comply with the OCP as much as possible. Then you have all the objectives that sit somewhere else for providing housing, and that whole idea that these numbers have to stay low, 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 and low will never provide the housing that Bowen is looking for. It's just that simple.
So I think I'll jump in, or Tim, did you look like you were about to say something? So I might go around and just ask Ron, and then also Tim, if they want to say something, then I've got a few thoughts that I've been writing down. Ron, did you have any thoughts or want to jump in, or?
I've got a few quite elementary questions here. I wonder if Daniel could clarify for me. First of all, how did we get onto this maximum floor area discussion if site coverage is the usual measure?
This came out of our discussion last meeting when looking at the affordable housing policy that's looking for 15% of the floor area. So then it's sort of looking, okay, how do you define what the floor area for the development is?
Why don't you, can I add a comment to that, which just occurred to me when Ron asked the question? So maybe for calculating, we should be using maximum lot coverage.
I think we talked about that last time, and it would be massive, right? Like it would be a very, very big number for these lots. And just to build on what that answer as well, this is also something, Ron, that we've been talking about as a committee, like the idea of maximum house sizes, and then encouraging, secondary suites or lock-off suites with bonuses. So I think it's all stemming from that as well. Daniel, do you remember I feel like we talked through if we like very high level, because these lots are massive. So if it's like a 30% lot coverage, or what's the lot coverage when they're this big?
Well, I know we talked about like, okay, what the current lot coverage of the site is. is
Mhm.
quite extensive.
Mhm.
What zone are they in right now?
There are R1
Which is
with a variation.
1,000 square feet plus 10%.
So essentially they would hit the maximum, so 1,500 square meters of lot coverage, so about 15,000 square feet. And then in theory, you could build on 3 floors. So in theory, it could be like 45,000
If we're talking
square
about,
feet of
yeah.
floor area, like it's currently allowed in the zoning.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're restricted to the 3 dwellings and a detached secondary suite in that maximum amount.
But shouldn't we just proceed with the usual lot coverage limits? Within those limits, to just say whatever is the actual building of floor area, then 15% of that should be allocated to affordable housing, rather than imposing maximum floor area sizes. I don't see why we need those maximum floor area.
Well, in parts of the max, like the lot coverage that's permitted now would be for all buildings and structures. So if it was just, if we said, okay, it's going to be like it would keep the same rural residential maximum lot coverage, or it would keep the like settlement residential lot coverage like we have for smaller lots.
How many square meters is an acre?
Is an acre.
But then it goes down to
4,000.
10%, right?
Yeah, so lot 1 is roughly an acre in size.
Yeah.
And the maximum lot coverage you can have for something that's an acre is basically what I've got. So a 2,000 square foot footprint and a 600 square foot garage and 100 square feet of deck.
That doesn't sound right.
Hey, Danielle, is the maximum in these zones, is it 10% lot coverage?
It's 10% plus 100 square meters. Sorry, for the SR2 zone, whereas the rural residential is 100 square meters plus 3%.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
To a maximum of
just-
1,500.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 things in Ron's question, which is a great question. Thank you, Ron. One is, I think the number ends up being quite large, and happy to be corrected if somebody's doing quick math, but I think it was just sort of ended up being really huge numbers. So then that calculates to quite a big affordable housing obligation, which I don't know, and maybe that's the way to go or not, but I think that was why it kind of got, we moved on to this idea of limits. And then I know, again, we've been talking as committee, I know Fritz and I are big advocates for it. This idea, there's an opportunity now, if this is a rezoning, just like Arbutus Ridge, just like a couple of the other ones we've talked about, to put in a maximum house size and then have sort of bonuses to encourage some other things, lock off suites or whatever to happen. So I think that's where that came from. But Ron, did you have another question or two? I
do. When we talk about affordable housing, how does if you come up with okay, there's going to be so much affordable housing, how does that get translated into stipulations of actual building forms? Because you can't just point at something and say that's got to be affordable, but rather you could say, for instance, it'd be a detached suite, and hope that that would be affordable. What would be
right? Yes, so in our affordable housing policy, we would be capturing it in a housing agreement. So if the answer is, there's 2 units of affordable rental that would be provided, we would be having housing agreement bylaws on those lots that says you need to provide X form of housing, and your maximum rental that you can rent it for would be X. And typically then how we would do it is at the rezoning stage, there would be a covenant that would be a condition of the rezoning that would go on the parent parcel and say, okay, when you subdivide,
okay,
you need to provide this amount of housing.
Okay,
and then,
just one last question. There's been some discussion of cluster zoning. Unless I'm mistaken, there's no suggestion of cluster zoning in the application, is there? And
no, I mean, I would say like this application is following the OCP provisions for clustering housing, hence the park, like the park dedication, and then the siting of the lots in a smaller, so that 40% of the lot be the park dedication. that is in essence clustering them, based on our OCP and our conservation development policy.
Thank you. No more questions.
Thanks, Ron. Tim, I just want to give you the chance. Did you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I think this is getting quite complicated, but I'd like to go back to some basic observations here, and this is based on experience from Whistler and our experience of trying to basically mandating secondary suites, and this was done in a neighborhood called Spruce Grove, and requiring that those secondary suites be affordable rental, and we actually defined a maximum rent. The suites got built, but we couldn't force people to rent. We could force them to build the suite. We couldn't force them to rent the suite. And in a lot of cases, because these were higher end homes, and the people building them didn't need mortgage helpers, and the rental revenue wasn't a big thing for them. A lot of them didn't get rented, or if they did, because there was such high demand for a long-term rental, employee rental, the landlords basically said, if you want to get this place, you're going to have to pay more than what the housing authority allows. And it was kind of done under the table. And if you complain to the housing authority, we're going to evict you. And so this became an enforcement problem that frankly was impossible. We couldn't. So we ended up with a number of suites, but not very, like a neighborhood of suites, but not very many of them being rented at the proper amount to employees, and there wasn't much we could do about it. Second observation is things have really shifted from the days, even on Bowen, when a rental suite, a long-term rental suite, was desirable from a mortgage helper. To make it basically more affordable to the people who were owning the house. I think that's shifted now to where, first of all, we aren't getting very many. I had a look at the data on building permits for secondary suites over the last 10 years, and there haven't been very many. It's like, 1 or 2 or 3 per year, and yet, in terms of business license applications for Airbnb, for short-term rental, those are increasing rapidly. So what's happening is we're not getting more suites being created on Bowen. We're getting more suites that are already there, shifting from either no rental or long-term rental to short-term rental. All this is to say, I don't think it makes sense for us to push for actual built affordable housing on this site. And I think I think we're going to do better in the long run in terms of our objectives if we do cash in lieu. And then we can look at the whole square footage 15% formula in terms of that. But in terms of number of units and how it's going to play out, I just don't think we're going to just get 2 rental units of affordable housing out there. I think we can get a lot more bang for our buck if we got cash in lieu and put that towards the housing fund and started doing this with many of our rezonings, so that we've actually got a housing fund and we can focus on multifamily projects like the one that's now going on lot 3, and actually have some more resources to deliver those. And those are the things that we're on the cusp of delivering right now, and we need, and also more housing closer to the cove.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, I have comments as well. Fritz, I'll go to you and then go to Ron.
Yeah, I think what Tim is saying is completely correct. It's much better to transfer funds. I'm all with you. But in the meantime, the other purpose of the Housing Advisory Committee is also to create a larger diversity. And I think that can be market. That doesn't need to be affordable. So if you say everything affordable is Cove oriented, and everything that is the other purpose to create smaller places for people to buy that are maybe somewhat less expensive. And I think the secondary suite, I think, Tim, you're totally right there as well. I think the reason why we think putting in secondary suites, at least from my point of view, okay, working as an architect, is actually the rental is just one option that people could do. So I'm totally with you. Most of them will not be rented out. But if a house is a secondary suite rental, the idea is that it does everything else. You know, like it's the caregiver, it's the kids that need some housing. It's just it's your home work from home offices, all that kind of stuff, right? But so it's just rental ready. And in certain areas, I think you're totally right that people are just not going to rent out. They're not going to spend millions and millions of dollars to get a waterfront property and then somehow rent half of their place out. It's just not going to happen. But if you allow them to build these suites, it has to be phrased differently. I think a secondary suite is not just there for affordable housing. That is just one of the purposes that may happen. But if you allow people to build a larger house that is more flexible in use, then it really helps. For instance, I think Bowen has a ton of existing single-family houses. People will hang on to them because they can't find something else that they may want to move to or downsize into, right? So then, but the idea that we built this, the clustering that we like is clustering that has less impact on the environment, provides smaller units, and where people can live in. Like now, if you buy a house and the zoning is already set for larger homes on larger lots, and these existing lots are all done in the 50s and 60s, and you know, just after the war, like people were buying cars. It's outdated. So we have to create smaller lots. And for instance, if you say these lots are so large, and you can only have a side coverage of 10%, that tells me that the lots should be smaller. There should be more in the parkland. And yeah, those lots can be smaller, and there can be more parkland, and there can be more smaller lots. Now you're achieving something, and it will probably create more value because people are going to, like if you have a half an acre lot or an acre lot or a 2 acre lot, it's not that half an acre lot is worth half of an acre lot. It's not true. It is you pay for the ability to build a house in the location that you want, and that's attractive. That sets the value. The size of the lot is this. I don't understand why a lot has to be that big with such a small area on it, but the intent is to protect as much as possible the environment. So, and not to cut all over the place. So I'm for more smaller lots. Maybe the big ones on the water stay the same because they create high values, and then. And that number 7, I find it it's just a number. It's not an important number. I would say that go up to, from my point of view, you can go up to 12 or so, or 14, or who cares? But if it's beautifully done and it's a huge success and there's so much value in it for the whole community, and then it creates value. And then Tim is right; you can get even more money for in the Cove because you build. Anyway, that's the way I think about it.
Thanks, Fritz. I'll go to Ron. You have.
Yes, I appreciate Councillor Wake's comments about the possible futility of requiring secondary suites. Although I don't know whether Bowen is the same as Whistler, but what I wonder about with respect to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. Daniel, could you tell us, please, how long has there been an Affordable Housing Reserve Fund on Bowen? How much money is there in it? And will it ever result in anything getting built?
So we established the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund in 2018. And we've received one contribution from a rezoning that provided $50,000.
So we might be a long way away from actually building any municipally owned multiple.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like that'd be probably a council decision, but it doesn't just have to go to, municipally built projects, but in theory, then it could go to support like a nonprofit housing project that, potentially like received grants from BC Housing or CMHC, but still had a shortfall. And then this would, I think the idea behind it then is the municipality would be in a position then to provide additional funds to make it, bridge that gap.
Thank you.
But if you have 15%, right? And you say you can build 15%, and you see how much it costs to build that. I don't know what type of numbers you're using. And even if you use that 2,000 square feet, right? If you have 2,000 square feet and you build 3 units, or you say you can build 3 units at 800 square feet or so in the Cove, right? Or 1,000, whatever. And you use a number now that we see all the time at Bowen. It's expensive. $600 per square foot is low on Bowen for building freestanding homes. So you take that number. If you then have to, you say you have to transfer 2,000 square feet. Now 2,000 square feet times 600 is 1.2 million. It has nothing to do with 50,000. So like these numbers are big. If you that number that you give of 50,000, and then you compare it, what is the value of 15% of the square footage, right? How do you calculate that? Mm-hmm. So like if you would have to provide that in built housing, right? And you take that number and multiply it by times, I don't know, take $500 square foot if you want, right? But then you get a number, right? A real number. And that real number allows Tim to build a lot of units. You see what I mean? So it's the transfer of value has to be realistic. But I think you have to create more value. That's just as simple as it is to get more results.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw in a few of my own comments here. Firstly, thank you, Tim, for explaining that, because that was also one of my biggest concerns was, how is this going to get built? Even if it was, say, a covenant on lot 3 that you have to build an affordable detached secondary suite, lot 3 could sit on the market for the next 15 years and never get purchased and never get built, and then there's no results. So your comments about trying to enforce those, and then even if it did get built, enforcing the rent level and all of that stuff was really answered a lot of my questions. So I think I'm very much, as a few others, I think are leaning towards cash in lieu makes the most sense for this, because that just seems to be the best result. And Daniel, just a quick check. What is the obligation with the affordable housing policy? Is it to actually produce built? I know there's cash in lieu, but if they were doing it, it's to produce a built finished space. So as Fritz was saying, if they were obliged to build, whatever, however many square meters or square feet, and the cost is $500 a square foot, does that calculate out to what they do? Is that the obligation?
I've been thinking about that in terms of, we haven't done any developments that provided cash in lieu. The affordable housing policy does say the units are intended to be cost neutral to the developer. And so what we've done were ones where they've built rental housing. Well, we're essentially agreeing, that the housing agreement is that they build it, they rent it out at an affordable rate, but then they're, gaining the revenue from it. So in theory, then the cost to them. So like, for example, the one on the pub, the 4 units on the pub have an affordable housing agreement that they, the rental units that are built are rented at an affordable rate. But then, it's the argument, well, the cost to the developer is actually the difference in the rent between the affordable rent and what the market rent could be, right? Like we wouldn't say, well, it costs them to provide those rental units, the cost of building it. So they're, they're 500 square foot units at 500 a square foot. Well, that doesn't seem like that's the cash value, because cash value is, well, they could build it and rent it for more.
Yeah. So I think just given our time, I don't think we're going to answer the question of how much if we talk about cash in lieu today. And I think that is a whole other discussion that we could have. So I'm keen to be involved in that if you want to bring that back to the Housing Advisory Committee, and we could maybe provide comments, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, because I don't think we have time to discuss that in detail today. I think it would be great today if we could make the recommendation that we think cash in lieu is the way to go. If it sounds like that's what we're directing, I think, Daniel, to correct me from that, that's kind of helpful. That's the information you might want and need today. And what was, I just want to check that my other notes here. Yes, that was about it. Yeah, so is that kind of what you're thinking, Daniel? Like what the information you want to get out of today?
Robyn?
Sure, Alison, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I get, thinking back, Belterra is an example of an affordable housing we created 5 units in Belterra when it was done,
Yeah.
and the developer built them. People signed up for them, they own them, and the price is fixed. So I guess I'm sort of sitting a little bit with, it's like lot 3 is already cleared. And if we had a couple more small lots on it, where a family could buy a small lot at an affordable price that's set, and build a house with, so the kids have a yard and there's some more, 3 bedrooms or something. And there is employment down in that area, and there will be more once it finally gets built out. And it might be nice to have a family that was, firefighter ready, living in the area and easy to get to the second fire hall. I guess with the 7 dwellings, that's what the OCP allows, right? So that's why the 7, where the 7 came from.
Yeah.
Do we need, when we did the housing policy, we were also talking about, affordable rental and affordable purchase. And I know we had an affordable purchase wait list, but part of the problem was a lot of people didn't qualify for a mortgage. But, what's wrong with thinking about, as Fritz's idea of more, how complicated is it to do more lots on lot 3, small ones?
Well,
Tim, I thought you might have some comments on that, because I think this came up last time.
Again, taking this all a little higher level, the affordable housing policy was developed really looking through a lens of building multifamily housing. It wasn't created through the lens of individual housing units on single family lots. And if you just think about the practicality of that and manage it, so now you've got however many different lots, those individuals are actually going to build the housing. Then you have to agree how much, what the whole idea of it being cost neutral to the developer is very difficult to apply. And I would argue, it's.
Well, I know we hoped when we did all that stuff, that policy, that the developers would build the housing, and it worked well in Belterra because there was, all the units were being built. So unfortunately with this one, there isn't a plan for a bunch of townhouses that 2 or 3 of them could be affordable purchase. So
which to me is the reason why we should be going with cash in lieu.
So can I ask what we did? I'm trying to remember, what did we do at Arbutus Ridge for affordable housing?
They have the housing agreement for the I forget what it's called, cottage residential development.
So the cottage residential is the affordable housing, but it's also a specific type of individual that's going to be in there. So okay, so we didn't really. Yeah.
So it's sort of a different scenario.
Totally different. And Evergreen?
Evergreen was prior, so they don't have an affordable housing.
But they were going to build some housing with suites and stuff in one of the final 3rd phases, and that hasn't really happened, has it?
Yes, the phases, I think the current phase that's subdivided has suites within it.
And then
but they didn't specifically go under this policy.
Okay, and then the other one I'm thinking of is Grafton Lands, Grafton Lake Lands. So there is affordable housing there. And is it being built by the developer?
So the first phase has the proposed 10 lots of affordable home ownership, sort of at the northern end of that first phase. And so that came, the concept of it came to the Housing Advisory Committee some time ago. The developer is still trying to work through what the best sort of formula would be and grappling with how exactly, but the concept behind it is 10 units of affordable home ownership to be sold essentially at the cost of construction and development. So we had agreed like a set value for the sort of land development, and then it would the concept would be to sell at the price of that plus construction. And I know the developer has struggled with escalating construction costs, and then, you know, the ability to then deliver something that is affordable at the end of that is a struggle.
Affordable rental in the other side.
And then, yeah. And like details of that haven't worked out, but that was the concept, is that the rental would be on the north side of the main road.
Yeah. So we're still at the whim of the developer.
Yeah. So I got Fritz and then Ron and then Tim. Go ahead, Fritz.
Yeah, so I think what Tim is saying is absolutely right. I think that the affordable housing should be transfer of money and to build, you know, multi-unit buildings. Separately from that, completely separately from that, the Housing Advisory Committee also has a role in increasing the variety of forms of housing and to provide housing that is less expensive. That's not affordable. That's not affordable for most people. They're just smaller houses. So that what we're saying, if there would be more smaller lots on this development that can actually create more value, and that increased value because more people are building smaller homes that are needed, right? That value is larger and can be transferred to build more multi-unit buildings, let's say closer to the cove, right? So I think this is a formula that is to do both. Like I think if you start to affordable housing, I think has to be seen totally separate. What is the best way to get the most affordable housing in the place where it's actually realistic? Tim is totally right there, right? Then we have a second objective, which is separate from that. And if we look at it like that, then we don't get this problem of trying to figure out how to make something affordable in a place where it's really difficult and it's not rented out and whatever, right?
So essentially, Fritz, if I can just paraphrase, you're saying, so to meet the objectives of the affordable housing policy, you would say, yes, we would look for a cash in lieu contribution to meet that policy. Separately then to advance goals for diverse housing, you would want to see, you know, like some additional smaller lots to provide diverse housing options that would be market rate, but they would be less expensive because they're a more diverse form of housing.
Yes, and provide like let's say what I hear too is that think about these larger homes that are there that have one or two people living in it that are willing to move, right? If there's something in their neighborhood that they want to move to for all kinds of reasons, right? And you built it, they just buy it and it has good value because they want it, right? So then if you, in a way, you can do both. That's what I think is so important. And if you look at every development proposal as an opportunity to provide the most affordable housing with a contribution, and you look at it also, how can you provide housing in that area of Bowen where it responds the most to actual need and variety of housing? Then we're on the right course, in my mind.
Thanks, Fritz. I want to keep moving because I'm watching the clock. Is everybody okay? I'm just going to check in. This meeting, the agenda had us scheduled for, oops, where's my agenda under all these different windows? We were to adjourn at 10:45, which is in a little less, more than 15 minutes. Are people okay to keep going? Does anybody have a hard stop that they have to? I just want to check in because we're going to have to really narrow in on our conversation, or we can let it go a little bit longer depending on people's time availability. Can people go a little longer to say 11 or 11:15?
Yeah.
Is there any objections to that? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So Fritz, does that work for you? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So just so we can keep the conversation going. Ron and Tim, you're next, but I do want to jump in because I have the similar thoughts to Fritz. I see this as an opportunity. So again, affordable housing, I think cash and lieu is the way to go. We'll kind of see that that's determined in our recommendation. But in terms of the diverse housing, Fritz, I'm totally in agreement with you. That is a secondary, concern of ours, is a objective of ours as a housing advisory committee. I was thinking and wondering what others thought that lot 3, and I haven't seen it physically, so I would probably want to ask others who had seen it. Is that an opportunity? Maybe instead of providing multiple smaller lots, could we provide that as this, the cluster zoning that we've worked on? And maybe it's a secondary option. Maybe it isn't, you have to do cluster zoning, but you can do whatever, whatever the typical resident, you can build a single family house with the RR whatever zoning, or the option on that one particular lot is you could do this cluster zoning. And the neat thing about that I see is then it's up to the market. Then it's just giving the opportunity to see if somebody takes it up, if a developer wants to come in and say, hey, this is great, I can build 3 or 4 or 6 or whatever little clustered homes, and see what happens with that. And if diverse housing is created, I see that as an opportunity, and sort of similar to what Fritz is saying, but just a different model. So I'll just let people think about that. Ron, you're next, and then Tim.
My questions have been answered. I just want to say I agree with the idea that you go for cash in lieu for affordable housing, but a bit of diverse housing in terms of smaller lots that'll be a little less expensive than otherwise. I'm good with that.
Good. Thanks, Ron. Tim.
So I agree as well. I think where I have a challenge is what diverse housing means, and what is we're still looking for lower cost. So I would rather term these things affordable housing and low end of market housing.
Yes.
And trying to, I mean, there's no point in having, I guess where I'm challenged here is single family homes, whether they're large or small, it's very difficult, especially with the building costs the way they are now, to make them affordable, to make them low end of market. So the way to do that is, perhaps like clustering, I suppose, will do that a little bit. But I think really what we're looking for is gentle density, and that's what in California and Oregon and Washington, in a lot of those communities, that's what they're looking at. Gentle density. In other words, rather than single family, they're looking at duplex, triplex, even sixplex, which is basically, taking a single family lot, but actually doing multifamily housing on it. And so Grafton Lake is an interesting example. And maybe it makes sense to do some smaller clustered lots there, do more than the number that was mentioned. Was it 6 or
10?
10. Okay, so I mean, maybe we do more than that. But what about the possibility of doing, some quadruplexes?
Well, Tim, sorry to jump in, but that's exactly what the cluster zoning is that we propose. And sorry, I forget that you have not maybe been in all the conversations that we've had, and you probably haven't seen the cluster zone because I think it was the last council. Okay. So yeah, so that is, no, and we're on the same page. That is exactly what was proposed. We looked at several other communities. They have cluster zoning. Yeah, so not the sort of cluster development. So we might have to use some different terms if it actually goes ahead. But exactly what you're saying, give the opportunity that, and I don't know how many units it is, if it's 4 or 6 or whatever it is, but taking that one lot, and similar to what Fritz has been saying for a long time, whatever you could build as a single family house, let's say it's 300 square meters or whatever it is, then build that into however many units. So maybe you build it into, whatever, however many at 750 or something like that, right? So that was the idea of cluster is it would be a single lot, probably strata. It would have to be developed somehow. And then, but it gives the market the opportunity to create some diverse housing that, as you say, hopefully would be low end of market, but that's tricky these days with development costs and housing, building costs. Yeah. Fritz, go ahead.
Yeah.
And Alison, I see you. Yeah.
Well, I still think that, Tim, I think what is really key here is that the smaller homes are just market. You know, if you say they have to be the bottom of the market, I think you're just expecting too much. Because like if you take, like in the city of Vancouver, 33 by 120, 4,000 square feet lot, 4,000, okay, is a lot that you can build a house on for a whole family, and they're worth all kinds of money, right? So if there's no point in doing duplexes or triplexes or fourplexes here. Like even a 4,000 square foot lot is a dot on the map, you know what I mean? That's how big these lots are. So, and it's more important to create value. And if you propose a really high number of density, it may not be approvable in that area, right? So if you say it is more like fitting that, you have to see what can an actual piece of land that is so beautiful and precious, what can it actually deliver? Now, if you build a single family lot, these things have value, you know what I mean? And they are a dot on the map. They're so easy to put in there because these areas are vast. If you put in cluster housing, you can probably put in 100 units, you know what I mean? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking from, we're so modest. Is it 7 or is it 10 or is it 12 or is it, you know, it's just like, that is so easy to pick up with a few smaller lots. They bring value. Now you get your 15%, and now you can build a lot more housing in the Cove. So what I'm saying is that look at creating value with smaller market units that people are looking for.
Thank you, Fritz. Yeah, Alison, go ahead.
Well, I guess the applicants are wanting to deliver on a will and deliver promises that were, you know, made and bequest to the community in a will, and also, you know, provide for their children of the deceased. And then you've got the whole issue of water and sewer
Yes.
and septic and all that stuff. So I'm thinking, you know, that lot 3 is a big lot and it's flat, and maybe down the road, whoever buys lot 3 would want to ask for rezoning for that to do something. But at this
Well,
point,
that's kind of what I'm
you know,
saying, Alison, is why don't we provide that as an option right now while they're already doing a rezoning?
because
that
it
they,
means amending the OCP and everything else, and it's going to drag the whole process out. And it's not, I don't think the applicants are what I would call developers. You know,
oh yeah, I
it's not,
wouldn't, and I'm not proposing they develop it. I'm proposing the
No,
lot
but-
is there. They then could sell it on to whoever might develop it. But I hear you about the OCP amendment. I'm that's
Yeah,
good information.
and simple. And then the other whole issue is water. You know, I don't know how much water you could get from Cowan Point Utility, other than what the existing licenses will give them.
Yeah. I think we should be somewhat modest about this and just set an example for the community, how adding a few smaller homes that have good market value work for everybody. You know what I mean? Like it is like if it's a principle that if island-wide it is not seen as a threat and it's not kind of you know, being really difficult to get it through the OCP, but it's a modest way, you know, to achieve all these different goals that we have.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying from a practical point of view, looking at it from the point of view of the applicant.
Yeah, well, that's the idea. That's
the whole process out longer, and I don't know if the practicality of the water supply would be the biggest hurdle of the whole thing.
Well, then be modest, and it all falls into place. Like, you know, keep all the lower lots exactly as it's being proposed, right? So that the will from Maggie Common is respected. And if you go higher to where lot 3 is, add a few homes that really nicely fit in that whole environment, you know, and make sure that it delivers a beautiful park system with the nice trails and all that. Then I think it will just, everybody will see it as a win-win for everybody, you know. And Tim gets more money to have to be successful. You know, that's where we are in my mind. It's not like suddenly plopping all kinds of higher density in places where this for the OCP says forget it. And then every single family homeowner, which is 90% of Bowen, is going to be scared. We don't want that.
Yeah. Thanks, Fritz. I mean, I think most of us are on the same page, and Alison, I do appreciate those comments, not only from the applicants, but of the OCP potential, limitations from services. And just so I know, Daniel, what time and cost would that add to the application if it was an OCP amendment versus what it is now?
I mean, I think the approach would be to come to council when I come with results of referrals and say, essentially, this is the Housing Advisory Committee recommendation, and look for direction from council to also bring an amendment to the OCP. And so almost being clear, like this is based on like committee and referrals comments to the application, and like assuming that the applicant's on board with the change, but that it's structured that like this isn't the applicant then requesting the amendment, but this is coming through the consultation process.
Okay.
There's a need for an OCP to have sort of early and ongoing consultation that council determines like what the extent of that consultation is needed. And then the additional change would just be that after third reading, the OCP has to be approved by the Islands Trust as opposed to a land use bylaw. They just have to provide comment earlier in the process. So it adds a step at the end, and then it adds the step for additional consultation required. Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that's useful. Thank you. Extra consultation. Okay. So I think in the interest of time, and I feel like we've discussed this, great discussion, everybody. Thank you. What I've come out with, and Steph, I don't know if you've been typing up anything, or I have just for recommendations. Still can't hear you, Steph. Oh, that's too bad. That's okay. So I've typed some stuff up, so maybe I'll read it out and then we can kind of discuss if that reflects. So I think that, well, actually, I haven't typed it up all that well, but I think to meet the affordable housing policy, I think we all are in agreement that cash in lieu would be the recommendation from the Housing Advisory Committee. I don't think there's consensus on how that's calculated, so I think that is very much to be determined. How that cost would be calculated. I appreciate Fritz's comments as to how, the cost of building and how that would actually result. And then also Daniel's comments on the fact that it was meant to be sort of cost neutral. So I think those aspects, and sorry, Steph, don't necessarily write all this down, but those aspects are what needs to be considered. So when you're calculating what that cash in lieu would be. So I think there's definitely work to do on that. So yeah, cash in lieu, work to do on how to calculate it. Although I did agree in principle, I mean, way back to half an hour ago or whenever we were talking about, I personally, and I don't know if everybody else agrees, in principle, if there was a maximum house size, the calculation that you did was, the total of the maximum house size less what they're allowed to do now, that additional that's allowed, taking 15% of that. In principle, I agree with that as a calculation. That seems reasonable, I think, to everybody, reasonable to the community, reasonable to the applicant. I think that's probably another good vote for putting some sort of size limit. But anyway, sorry, back to my points here. So cash in lieu as affordable housing, to be determined how it would be calculated. I think Fritz and I would agree. I'm not sure if Ron would agree or anybody else, but I would recommend looking at a maximum house size, taking into account the size of the lots and the value of the lots, some sort of maximum house size with some kind of bonus for, and I think we could call it either lock-off suite or rental ready, whatever language you want to use. And I know Fritz and I would be in agreement. I don't know if everybody else would agree with that. And then I did like the idea that extra space would be excluded from the housing, the affordable housing contribution, because it really is the idea of providing this extra space that would be the diverse housing. And then the last one, which would be my recommendation, and I think some of us, or maybe Tim and Fritz are at least on board, would be, to look at lot 3, an opportunity to provide a cluster zoning or some form of that to allow some gentle density. It would be, I would assume it would be like a Bearland strata or some kind of strata development of a small number of extra units to create some diverse housing.
I don't think you should bring in the word strata, because
okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Like for instance, if you can easily cluster some small lots there. And that creates value. So the idea of going into duplexes and fourplexes, I think, is just a mistake because it doesn't work there. And so the word clustering in the OCP means clustering lots, right? That's the only thing you talk about, right?
Okay.
So that's, I think, what we need to do, because like, don't mix it up. Like, we have to create value to get affordable housing done in the Cove. That seems to be the best way to look at this property.
Okay. So I don't think we have consensus on that, because I also think the opportunity to create some, duplexes or whatever that might be, a small cluster of them, is still a good idea. And I hear Fritz, and he's thinking more small lots. So I don't think we have consensus on that, but maybe we just recommend looking at lot 3 as an opportunity to provide, should we just call it gentle density? Is that kind of a catchphrase
like
that would cover everything? And we could go into further, we could have another discussion and make a better recommendation if council wants it. But I think that would be kind of a high level recommendation, is to look at lot 3 as an opportunity to provide some gentle density at, I don't know if we have to say anything more than that. So those were kind of my thoughts. Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Well, I think I agree with Fritz that I don't think duplexes and fourplexes really make sense on this site. So, and in terms of what Fritz is, what we're all looking for is to provide some diversity, and so small clustered lots that are actually going to still have single family homes. If it's gonna bring some diversity, I guess that's okay. I think that the duplex, triplex, sixplex thing should happen, closer to the Cove, where it makes more sense.
Actually, at Seymour Bay itself.
Well, even then, it's there's no transit there.
Well, you need the density to get the transit.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
so I think we've got 3 main points: the cash in lieu, amount to be determined, lot 3 to be evaluated to potentially have some additional gentle density, and then I don't know how everybody else feels about the maximum house size, and then a bonus. So and I think when we make a recommendation, it kind of has to be from the whole committee. Am I right?
Well, in general, I wouldn't use the word density if you don't need to. If you say from a few small lots added, that's far easier to digest. But I also like about the word lock-off suite. Lock-off suites are in the interest of the owners. That's why they're interested in it. Secondary suites that you have to rent out scare people. I mean, that's just, that's just the way it works.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So yes, Steph,
the facility is.
Yep. I'm fine with lock-off suite rental ready, that language. I'm completely fine with that. Steph, are you able to share your screen if you're typing these?
Density. Like if you
and so I'm okay with changing the language of density. So I think we just have to put, that lot 3 be looked at as an opportunity to create smaller, more diverse housing. Is it kind of something like that?
That's good.
Smaller, more diverse housing options on lot 3. So, okay, so thanks, Steph, for typing this up. That cash be provided to BIM housing reserved in lieu of the affordable housing policy requirement, that the housing advisory committee be involved in discussion regarding how the monetary amount would be determined in the future. I mean, I wouldn't mind being involved. I don't know that we have to be, but just that the amount, I don't know how we could phrase that. Yeah, that the amount is to be determined. The amount of cash, is to be determined considering the I'm trying to think of the word, not principles, the intent of the affordable housing policy, something like that. And the housing advisory committee would be happy to collaborate or assist in giving feedback on how to work that out. That lot 3 be considered an opportunity to provide gentle density. So we'll change that to provide smaller, diverse housing options. So maybe just, diverse housing options.
Smaller lot, diverse housing options.
I'd rather just leave it, if we can, just leave it open. I'm hearing all of your feedback, so I'm not necessarily fighting against it, but I think let's leave it open because obviously this has to go back to the applicant as well, right? Like, and it's going to be a discussion between planning and the applicant and what might be a good solution or not. So I'd rather kind of leave it open if we can, that our recommendations to look at lot 3 be considered as an opportunity to provide smaller, diverse housing options.
Yeah.
Because who knows what that looks like, right?
Smaller,
And-
an adjective of diverse, or is smaller, what's smaller?
Well, yeah, but yeah, that's a relative notion, but fine. Diverse, yeah.
I think we need to be clear whether this to me is vague. Some people are going to assume that this means
Smaller houses.
duplexes or multifamily.
Yeah, I would say a few smaller homes. I really would do that because it's so.
Okay, I mean, if that's the consensus of most, I'll relent. So that lot 3 be considered an opportunity to provide, yeah, a few. I think that's you can tell me if you want different, but I think a few leaves it a little vague, you know, so we can the number can be determined. A few smaller lots to create diverse housing options. Is that language that everybody likes? Few smaller lots to create diverse housing options.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
That language is okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So delete the
that's
next point.
bullet.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, the next bullet can just be deleted. That's a leftover from what we were just editing. Thanks, Steph. That a maximum house size is implemented on lot 3 with, and I'm going to say with
It's not lot
bonus.
3.
No, correct. Thanks, Alison. So that maximum house size is implemented with floor space bonus for rental ready / lock-off suites.
No, just call them lock-off suites.
Okay,
Yeah, I
If
think I like
that's-
that better too. Because
lock-off suites, just use that term. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty interchangeable. There's a pretty
People can
small
do with them what
difference
they want.
probably. Sure. Okay, so so the only thing that isn't clear in our people okay that we just leave it with the point on like the cash amount to be determined, so that we're recommending a cash in lieu and that it's to be determined. And if councillor or the planning department want to come back to us with assistance or advice on how to create that, they can, but we're not going to be insistent on asking for that.
So what?
Daniel,
That makes sense to me.
that makes
I'm
sense to you? Okay. Alison, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm hung up on your maximum house size.
Okay.
The maximum house size right now under the existing zoning is not unreasonable. So are you saying we're going to say a maximum house size that's smaller than what could be allowed under the existing zoning?
So yeah, my proposal is it would be something similar to what Arbutus Ridge has, something similar to more like other recent rezonings where you pick a number.
Arbutus Ridge is small lots compared to these.
Yeah.
And
So, and maybe the house size is altered, you know, because of that. So maybe it's 300 square meters or 60 square meters. Like I'm not saying what a number is.
well,
Because again,
how are
I
we
think
going to determine the number? Are you going to let council determine that? Or is this going to be a recommendation? I mean, right now, if I'm understanding correctly, the maximum house size is 100 square meters plus 3% of the lot size. And I don't know how big, and that, so I don't think it's
that's site coverage, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
that site coverage. Yeah.
that site coverage. Yeah.
Mhm.
Can
So the
I,
reason why, okay, go.
I was
So I'll
gonna
just
say-
speak, Daniel, and then I'll say the reason why I think it's a good idea, firstly, because it's sort of a principle that we've been talking about as a housing advisory committee, that you actually have a maximum house size. But secondly, I think it will greatly assist in the calculation for the affordable housing contribution. Daniel, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, doing the math, if it stays at the rural residential lot coverage, the maximum lot coverage would be for not the big lot, but the other ones would be somewhere between 200 and 300 square meters of coverage.
Right.
More on the smaller end. Or if it changed to say, well, this is more like SR2, then it's more like 400 square meters of lot coverage.
Yeah,
So it
and
makes a
then
big
that's lot
difference.
coverage, exactly, and then that's
Yeah.
lot coverage, not size of house, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, yeah, and I'm not saying it has to be tiny, because I'm in agreement, these are particular lots in a particular part of the island with, you know, and they're going to be expensive, so I'm not saying you limit it to, you know, a 200 square meter house, but yeah, I think some sort of size. So I'm happy to throw a number out there if people want. I'm also happy to kind of leave it open and leave that to the planning department to make a recommendation in working with the applicant, because I think from what was said earlier, they are also considering smaller homes. So I think we could leave that to the planning department and the applicant to come up with a proposal of what that number is, but we're simply recommending there's a maximum house size with bonus floor space, and that number will assist, I think, with figuring out what this cash in lieu, because otherwise, how do you put some metrics to it? I'm seeing everybody's so tiny. I'm seeing, I think Fritz and Ron had your hands up. So maybe Ron, because you haven't had quite as much airtime today. So Ron, go ahead, and then we'll get to Fritz.
Robyn, I assume that the lock-off suite, if it gets built, would not count toward the affordable housing commitment.
That's what I would think, because it's a bonus and it's contributing to diversity and all that stuff. I mean, you can bet people are going to build them, right? Because somebody who buys these expensive lots are going to want to build as big a house as they can. So that would be my suggestion. Again, I appreciate Alison's comment of looking at it also from the applicant's point of view. Let's find a reasonable number that benefits the community and is feasible for the applicants, to a reasonable number for this affordable housing, contribution. Fritz, go ahead.
I think for this parcel, a maximum site coverage is actually appropriate, because we're talking about environmental protection, right? And then if a house gets 2 or 3 stories, has less impact. You see what I mean? Like if you have floor space, that can stretch out on 1 story endlessly, right? But if you say that some of these formulas that may actually be quite close to the existing formulas, it's probably worthwhile to check what numbers come out of that and then see. But if you say, in this case, right, now think about people reviewing this proposal, like neighboring property owners, right? And it just talks about site coverage and not about maximum house size, right? A lot of people will say, yeah, the site coverage should be limited because it's environmental, such a unique site. Right? But if you say you have a maximum house size, then they say, why do I have a maximum house size? Why can't I build? So you have to look at it from the point of view of the people that will be using it. Right? So I think maximum site coverage here is I think a pretty good tool. There will also be setbacks, of course, right? The 30.
So then, is there still a bonus? Is there still a bonus for a lock-off suite? Because really, then I don't see a mechanism for that. If you're giving a site coverage, you could build, the lower story or whatever. What do you think, Fritz? Is that still an opportunity?
Well, that's true. We like that. And in that case, you do need a maximum house size. But if the site, when you go through as an architect, right, there's all these different things that affect your design, right? And and all of them are at play. It doesn't mean you can have both, from my point of view.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe it's both. And again, I would leave those numbers open. Daniel, is it okay? Or do you want some numbers from us? Is it okay to leave that to you and the applicant to determine what might be inappropriate? But I actually think, Steph, if you could type that in, that I'm okay with that, with a maximum lot coverage and a maximum house size. And again, they could be generous numbers. I'm not saying they have to be 200 square meters. But I think those numbers to I agree with you, Fritz, site coverage to protect the environment, some house maximum, again, that helps give numbers and parameters to everything, and it could be generous. Sorry, Tim, did you have your hand up? I missed it in the discussion. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So I like where you've gotten to. I think you need both. We're trying to control something, and with one mechanism, or site coverage or square footage, and we're worried about what's going to happen to the other if we only specify one. So I think absolutely, and I think Daniel can probably come up with a reasonable compromise based on what we can suggest.
I think so too. Great. So I'd love to wrap this up. Steph, do you have a clear recommendation that we could have a look at and then all hopefully approve unanimously our recommendations? Okay, that the Housing Advisory Committee supports, we can get rid of the duplicate support, rezoning application with the following recommendations. That cash be provided to the Bowen Island Municipal Housing Reserve in lieu of the affordable housing requirement, the amount to be determined considering the intent of the affordable housing policy. That Lot 3 be considered an opportunity to provide a few smaller lots to create diverse housing options. That a maximum site coverage and a maximum house size be implemented with floor space bonus for lock-off suites. I'm happy with that. Does anybody have some wordsmithing they want to do, or are people happy to proceed?
Looks good.
Okay, can I have somebody motion to move to accept? Thank you, Ron. I guess a second, I don't know, or do we just, I can't remember these things. Do we just all say yes and no? Okay, so everybody in favor, and I can't see everybody's hands, so you'll have to put them up
Aye.
nice and high. Yeah, okay. And Tim, is yours up? I can't quite see. Are you in favor? Yeah, okay, so I think that's unanimous, so speak up if it wasn't. That looks like it was unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion, and hopefully that works with all the other feedback that I can only imagine you're getting from all the other committees.
Okay.
Okay, let's move along. So we had Florida. Yep. Okay, so that's finished. 5.1, council and committee updates. Councillor Morse. Did you have anything for us?
I don't think so.
Okay, excellent. I think we probably just have that
Well-
there as a bit of a standing item in case.
Yeah.
Oh, Daniel. Yeah.
I was just going to say, at Monday's council meeting, so we didn't have time to get it on this agenda, but we had a referral to this committee for information, which was the report on business licensing.
Right.
So committee members who are very keen can go back and see my report and presentation, and I'll be giving a similar presentation to the committee at our next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so on to 6.1, the Housing Advisory Committee Work Plan preliminary discussion. And so we have our work plan, page 20 to 23. Let me go to that. I'm going to put it out there that, oh, this is the 2022. Are we, sorry, Steph, was the idea to kind of review it and take things forward? Is that what the idea? Okay, I'm going to ask everybody if you're okay if we shelve this until the next meeting. I think my brain's a bit at capacity, and I feel like the rest of us are. So let's put that on the agenda for next time. I think I certainly have enough going on in the next month that I'm not going to be able to get anything done. So let's put that on the agenda for next time, and then hopefully, so the other two pieces of other business I was going to bring up is I have heard back from City Spaces, and they are available if we have our February date for them. They're available to come and give a short talk on both government funding opportunities, and they can give us a bit of information on community land trust versus housing society or whatever it is. We'll have to clarify what we're asking them. They can give us, high level overview of that, and then the government housing funding opportunities. So we'll determine our next date in a moment. The other thing I just wanted to follow up, and maybe Steph, we can just sort of add this to our next one, or I don't know if we take this up to council, but I do remember, Councillor Morse, you might remember this. I think sometime at the end of the last term of council, we presented the cluster zoning report, and then I think the thing was to have a committee of the whole discussion on it. So I just want to, it's not urgent, but I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of on the radar. I don't know if council's I don't know where that fits in with your planning or whatever it is. So, okay, it's in the agenda planner. Okay, so we'll just make sure that kind of just doesn't get lost, because I really would like to follow up that report and see something move forward. Number 7, election of chair. Okay, this is always fun. So does anybody else want to be the chair of the committee?
You're doing a
I'm gonna guess
fabulous
the
job.
stage.
I want it,
Yeah,
Robyn.
thank you. All right, I will accept the nomination. I'm assuming nobody else is running against me, so I'm the chair. And Fritz, would you like to continue to be my vice chair? I think you were last time.
Well, this far, it hasn't really been that stressful, that part, so.
I don't think you've had to do anything. So if you'll continue in the role, we'll make sure it's not too stressful. Good. So we have our chair and vice chair. And is there anything else on our agenda, Steph? Or I think that's probably it. Meeting date. That's right. Meeting date. Okay. So if we can look at calendars.
I'm gonna run and get my phone.
Okay, perfect. It seems to be that Monday and Friday mornings generally seem to suit people's schedules. So Tim, I don't know if you want to avoid council meeting days or if you prefer that. So it's all kind of the same thing. So if we could do a Monday, or if these Friday mornings work, I'm quite open to a Friday morning. So I'm guessing we'd look at mid-February. There is the holiday weekend on the 20th, but hopefully that doesn't affect anything. Go ahead, Tim.
I would say Fridays are more likely to be better, but I could do a Monday too.
Okay, so would Friday the 10th work? Steph's suggesting that, or Monday the 13th? Monday the 13th slightly better for me, but I can make Friday the 10th work as well.
Okay, I can't do either of
Either
those.
way.
Oh, either of them. Okay, so that doesn't work. So Steph, do you want to, because you're the one who, we need you and we need the Zoom. So do you want to, is there anyone other time you can find, maybe Friday the 17th?
That
Is
works for
that
me.
available, Steph, as a committee? Is that family day? Oh, that is the family day weekend. So that's the Friday of the long weekend. So yeah, is that, I'm taking the Tuesday off. I'm not taking a Friday off. So I don't know if that, is that,
So what about,
are people,
when are you back, Tim?
I'm back on the 13th, maybe in time for the council meeting, maybe not.
okay. So does Friday the 17th in the morning work for people, or are they going away?
That works for me.
Works for me.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Daniel, Steph?
I'm
Oh, Steph,
not
does that not work for you?
sure.
Okay. Okay. So Steph's
No.
saying the 24th, Friday the 24th. Does that work for others? That's working for Steph.
Yeah,
I'm completely open, so that's fine.
That might be good too, because I've been targeting the 13th to go back to council with this rezoning. So if anything
Okay.
comes out of that February 13th meeting, then we would be able to get
Great.
it on 24th agenda, but probably not
Okay.
for this.
yeah, no, that's good.
Okay. So should we, I'm hearing no objections. So Friday, the 24th of February at 9:30 a.m. There we go. Okay, fantastic. Thank you everybody for your time. Fantastic discussion. I always enjoy these, and hopefully helpful, Daniel, to you and the applicants. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with this. It sounds like a lovely site and a good opportunity. So thanks everybody. We'll see you in whatever that is, 5 or 6 weeks. Take care. Bye.
Okay.